Welcome to If the Public Only Knew, the show that pulls back the curtain on what it really takes to build and lead a business. Host Gary Cinderbrandt sits down with some of today's most dynamic CEOs, founders, and leaders to dig into their origin stories, hard-earned lessons, and the missteps that nearly derailed it all. These are unfiltered, no-hype conversations designed to inspire, challenge, and fuel your own journey. Now here's your host, Gary Cinderbrandt.
Welcome back to If the Public Only Knew. I have no idea where this one's going to go, frankly, because my guest today, Doug Sandler, basically taught me what you could actually do with a little creativity and a little technical help in podcasting. And Doug, I have no idea if I'm ever going to make any money doing this, but I sure am having a good time. So welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks, Gary. Well, sorry, I didn't mean to. I've stepped on you, so I'll clear it out of the way and let you do your thing, man.
No problem at all. A little bit of background. Originally, as many of you know, I wanted to put a show together that would bridge the gap, the communications gap between investors / entrepreneurs and financial advisors, wealth management folks. Now, we're not talking about the folks that are going to tell you what to do with 10 grand. The wealth management space that I grew up in, most of my colleagues at this point, people I've known forever, are running books of business in the $500 million to $1 billion plus range. So there's a lot at stake, and I felt putting a podcast together in that regard might be usable for some people. Oftentimes, when an advisor says one thing, a client hears another, and the reverse is certainly true. But I started to find out some really interesting stories when I had some investors on the show. And I found out that their stories were really where my focus was. What they do with their money is what they do with their money. But the journey of the entrepreneur resonated with me for one particular reason. When you start as a financial advisor, as I did at the ripe old age of 24, you get a desk and a phone and a chance, and you have nothing else going for you. You either figure it out or you're gone. 90% of advisors still fail within their first 3 years. So you talk about the entrepreneur's journey, anyone that succeeded as an FA was on that journey. I came to Turnkey Productions and our guest today, Doug Sandler, because I realized doing post-production work on my own podcast was basically idiotic. I could devote a lot of time to it, and at best I'd be mediocre. But there were better things I could do with my time. I was fortunate enough to be referred to Doug, and we've had a great relationship ever since, which was especially enhanced when I talked about the guests or the opportunities I was getting from a company I had hired, paid a fair amount of money to, that were way behind in what they promised. And Doug, I just think you mentioned, just send a calendar link over and we'll take care of it. And I've had great guests ever since. So Doug, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man.
I can't tell you, you've had a major impact on my ability to do this stuff and just how meaningful I think it all is. I'm not sure where it all comes out, but I've always believed in karma. So it's great to have you, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. And you already had it in you. You brought it to the table. You just needed someone to help open up the opportunity for you. So you do the majority of the work. Yeah, we do the technical stuff, but you do the hard work, which is actually building that relationship and putting that client into your services or into your ideas or your joint venture projects that you're working on together. So hats off to you for actually listening to my coaching and taking, so many clients don't listen as I share, but they have their own way. And I'm like, well, why did you hire me? If you have your own way, you're already going to go.
It's not just the fact that you've helped me on the technical side and get these shows produced, which is great and seamless at this point. If I don't screw up that Monday.com app, which still mystifies me, but that's another story. But the relationships that you've helped me establish with people that literally just show up on my calendar, and I do background on them. I'm like, wow, holy shit, this is really cool stuff. Mm-hmm. I've been able to get great advice from a lot of these people. Issues they're working through, I could help them with, and it's the other way around. So there's a lot of, I would say, income that may not be measured in a monetary capacity, but enhances things that I'm doing in other parts of my life that I'm learning from interacting with, quite frankly, is a unique group of people. So anyway, quick plug. If you are listening to this and you're thinking about starting a podcast, call Turnkey. Get hold of Doug before you do it. He may tell you it's a great idea. He may tell you, no, not ready, but he's not going to sell you something, which
Yeah,
kind of gets us
it's
to
that.
what I want to talk about.
Yeah, it's that remember when we were all green and young in the business, whatever business that we are all in, and for your community that's listening, same idea that anybody with a check or a checkbook could become a client. And you realized after maybe doing that for about a year or maybe a few years that, man, am I taking on a lot of heavyweight clients here that aren't really producing for me and helping me by referring business. And I really only like to work with people that I like myself. So it used to be anybody with a check could become a client, and now I'm very discerning with who I want to have on my client list, and that was something we talked about before you hit record, and I'm sure we'll talk about more
You know,
at length too.
you summed up the advisor's dilemma when you start a business from scratch. And it's a dilemma, as you know, that I'm deeply involved in helping to solve right now. That when you start as a financial advisor, basically you'll take anybody with a pulse. And then you realize as you become more successful in that seventh, eighth, or ninth year, and you're still there, and you don't feel like a fraud anymore, maybe half the people you onboarded, you're not really crazy about.
Right,
And the other half you're in love with. And some of the people you're not crazy about might have a lot of money.
right,
But
right.
it's like that phone weighs 5,000 pounds when you go to pick it up. So what do you do? And identifying them up front was something I learned by default. I had a good manager who convinced me to give away half my clients in my third year, and I became much more discerning about how I was doing it, not really recognizing that I was kind of stumbling through a lot of the realizations that your father David discovered
Mm,
in the same way. I didn't realize I was following a lot of those systems that were out there. I was just unaware of who David Sandler was.
mm.
David Sandler, for those of you that don't know, invented the Sandler Selling Systems. Doug is his son. So let's walk back a little bit and talk a little bit about the realization that you grew up with, that not every buyer should be a client. And just because you've got a need doesn't mean you're going to control the entire conversation. What was that whole evolution like, watching your dad come to this realization and build what, for all intents and purposes, I guess it's international now in scope,
Mm.
something that is just literally teaches people better ways to sell. What was that experience like?
When you grow up with a marathoner as a mom or a dad, you just assume that you're going to get out there and run. And when you're a fly fisherman kid and you grow up with a dad that's a fly fisherman, you grow up to love fly fishing. And so often, I'm sitting around the kitchen table with my dad and my brother. I was 6 years old, and we're putting together the manuals for what was the early phase of the Sandler Selling System in 1970, and going up to the attic and pulling down more binders and bringing them down to the kitchen table, and then taking that little binder clip thing and putting it around all of these pages and looking at this submarine, which was the basis of the entire selling system. You don't know any different. I would love to say, oh, at 6 years old, I recognized, genius at the time. I didn't. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was just helping my dad. And then I would go out on sales calls with him, and he would bring me into these group presentations that he's making. He says, Dougie, just sit over there and just kind of, just listen in, just hear what's going on. And the client never had a problem with it, because anybody that's got a 6-year-old with him as you're going into a sales call is always thinking, isn't that great? He's got
Yeah.
his kid. What a great, and you emotionally went over the client. So for me, I was just probably a prop, but for me, I was learning every step of the way, and it was great. It's hard to answer the question, what was it like and how much impact, because it's all I knew. I was out
Right.
running my marathons and fly fishing. You know what I mean?
So as you're growing up with this, you're going through school, you know what other kids' parents do. What would you say to someone, that'd say, well, what does your dad do on career day? I mean, they'd say, what's your dad going to talk about if he comes in on career day? Well, how did you describe it? What he
Well,
did?
in the 70s and 80s, sales was a four-letter word. It was that you never wanted to talk about sales, because sales was always the slick, tricky, manipulative guy that comes in. And my dad was like the Columbo of selling. He would come in, he wouldn't 100% no direction. Purposely, he talked about sales being a Broadway play put on by a psychologist. It's all about understanding the mentality of the person, the prospect sitting across the table from you, and not rolling over them, but actually being a little bit more removed from the conversation, not knowing all of the answers. You know how great it is when you go into a talk to a salesperson you ask the salesperson a question. He goes, "That's a great question. I don't really know the answer to that. Let me find that out for you." When somebody says that, as opposed to listing all of the product specifications and running through every intricate detail of the product you're trying to buy, that feels like you're talking to a know-it-all. I want to talk to a person when I'm buying something. And I really felt like when I was having these conversations, I would tell people that my dad created a selling system. He's super good at it. And I have brought him in a couple of times into my high school salesmanship class. And we had a great time because he was such a non-salesy sales guy that it was easy just to say my dad created a selling system.
It resonates so well. And, you can tell, for instance, in my industry, you can tell when you're going to win a meeting. It's whoever talks the least wins.
Right, right.
And my goal always was, and I used to teach this when I would train advisors, that you want to ask open-ended questions, but not just open-ended questions. You want to ask provocative questions. You want to ask questions that people need to consider and think through and give them a chance to really dig in and have the realization like, oh, this is not what I expected to hear. For instance, there have been times people have asked me a question. I probably know the answer, but I may respond with, I'm not exactly sure I understand what you're asking me. Can you rephrase it?
Nice.
And then I would think it through. I'd say, that's a really interesting question. My thinking on that is, and then I would look at them and say, I'm not exactly sure I'm right. Was that the answer that you were looking for?
That's great. That's called a reverse in my dad's language. And that's such an easy tool to use when you either need a little bit of time or you want to get the prospect to continue talking. It's like, that's a great question. Can I ask you, why'd you ask me that question right now? Or, what were you asking about? And if you do it in a way that is non abrasive, the prospect does not realize what you're doing. And I'm not saying to manipulate the prospect. I'm saying the more information you have as a provider of services, a vendor, a salesperson, whatever you want to call yourself, the more information you have, the better it is for you to understand what problem that you can solve for your prospective client. And isn't that really the nature of what we're talking about? Is what problem can I help you solve without giving you all of this ancillary information that you don't need in order for you to make a decision as to whether you want my service or not. Like if the client doesn't care if it's red, black, or blue, they don't care what color it is. Why would you get into a whole conversation about color of the product? It just doesn't resonate with the prospective client.
To me, it is so logical and so meaningful. And I deal with this all the time with advisors. Tell me what your value proposition is. And I'm like, has anyone ever said, you got the business 5 minutes after you said that? And they say, well, like, no. It's like, why do you keep saying it?
Right.
I don't know what else to say. Because to me, if you think about it, if I give you a value proposition, how can I propose something over which you have absolutely no experience and no baseline to judge?
Mm-hmm.
Right. To you, it's just cost.
Right.
So how can I, and that is one of the biggest problems I see when in any professional relationship. You're proposing value. When you and I first got together, the value to me was palpable. You're going to produce my shows. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. You deliver on everything. Fine. But I could define what that is.
Right.
But that value has been enhanced greatly by just an offhand conversation. Send me your Calendly link. And now all of a sudden, I'm getting more downloads. I'm getting great guests. People are hearing.
Let me just throw this in. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think what's so valuable about what you're saying is this. If I gave you all of that information up front, I'm going to book the guests for you. I'm going to handle your scheduling link. You may have felt at that time, maybe not. I'm not 100% sure, but some people feel like, well, wait a minute. I'm going to be paying for that service then, and that might be a little too much for me to get into, and that's I'm losing some control. So maybe when people approach me as I'm looking for podcast production, I stay in the lane of I can do your editing, your distribution, your social media. I can do all of that stuff. To start to get into guest acquisition, it took you a little while and a short schedule for you to realize, this is another aspect of the process that I don't want to get involved in. Maybe Doug can help me out, or maybe I just go to Doug and say, I'm running out of guests. And I'll say, don't worry, I'll take care of it, and not charge you for it, or just include it as a part of the value of the services that we add.
Right. And I didn't know at the time. And I imagine if you thought I was just, somebody that, oh, I let this guy in by mistake, he's not really giving us good quality stuff, I doubt you would have ever offered to take over my calendar. Because that could snap back on you.
Well, the other side of it too is there's another 7 or 8 things that we do and we'll talk about these, after we're done this recording at some point when what's the expression, the teacher will appear when the student is ready. It's like, okay, now if you weren't, let's say one of these things is social media video shorts, we can provide 20 of them per episode or 3 of them per episode or whatever it is. If you didn't need that at the time, it would seem like that was just a service that you're paying for but not getting use of. I very much subscribe to the school of crawl, walk, run. Why provide all of these other services up front? Know that you have a full bag of tricks that you have access to, and you can even ask what those things are. But hearing them and not needing them is not of value. So for me, I'll either introduce them to people in the beginning and say, we'll talk about these things down the road, or I can introduce them down the road and it's the same benefit to you as the client.
And it's funny, again, I bring the corollary back to advising where you didn't oversell. I was referred to you by someone I'd actually had on my show. You and I talked, you recognized what my problems were, and you were very definitive about it. And on the first set of things you said you would deliver, you delivered. It was just right there.
Nice.
So that starts to build a relationship that's not based on transactions,
right.
Much more based on trust. Your father's selling system, because of this concept of solving a mutual pain point, naturally aligns those two parties, similar to what you're doing now in helping expand this universe. At what point do you take someone who is just bashing their head into the wall for minimal return and convince them, or how do you walk that through to say, look, you're approaching this the wrong way, whether it's their podcast, their product, or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. How do you walk them through to kind of take that jump to do that crawl, walk, run approach? And let's expand that to sales in general.
So really good question. And it's a matter of having a gentle conversation with someone and say, hey, and we can role play here for just a second. Gary, do you mind if I have a conversation? It's going to be a little bit hard for me to have this conversation with you. Would you be okay if I share some things with you that I think might impact our relationship? Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay,
let's
cool.
hear it.
One of the things I noticed when we first got started, your eagerness, and I love the fact that you were eager. I'm challenged though, and my team is challenged because you want to be on third base and I'm still on first base with you. Are you okay if I either speed up and you're going to trip a little, or would you rather me stay where I am and bring you to the point with me where I know that you would remain comfortable doing what you're doing with podcasting? Which one of those would you rather do? You want to trip or do you want to be comfortable? Which one?
I don't mind tripping in a skinned knee if I've got somebody there that can explain what I tripped over.
Great. All right.
And I don't trip over the same things twice.
Excellent. So it sounds like you're the kind of guy that will learn from lessons. So here's what we're going to do. I really subscribe to the school of crawl, walk, run. You've started your podcast here. I think we're going to here, and this is going to be, I'm going to get you up to third base. I'm going to get you there quickly. I don't want you to get frustrated if you're not able to pick it up quickly. Do I have permission to share these extra things with you that may get you tripped up without you coming back to me and saying, Doug, you put me through this process too quickly?
Definitely. I can take a punch.
All right. So outside of role playing for a moment,
right.
I just walk you through the process where I'm asking you permission for you to fail. And that's okay for you to fail. I just don't want you ever as a provider of services, Gary, not inside role playing, outside role playing here. I don't ever want you as a provider of services to put yourself in a bad light with your client by pushing them through a process or by selling them something that they don't feel like they need right now, even though you know they need it eventually. We can always get there down the road. And that's what I love about selling, especially when you say, hey, are you okay if we have an uncomfortable conversation right now? Who does that? Nobody does that in
No,
selling.
and it's more, and again, the crossovers to wealth management are extraordinary, because one of the things I always tell people as I'm onboarding them is, um, I'm going to tell you what you need to hear, but it may not always be what you want to hear,
Yeah,
and you need to be okay with that.
I love that. I love that.
And basically, you're establishing the power dynamic in the relationship, and it engenders, it kind of forces that trust issue up front. Because why would I tell them negative things that they may just withdraw from and take their business elsewhere?
Right.
And
Right.
the guy down the street says he can get me 13% per year, no risk whatsoever, forever. You should go to the guy down the street.
Yeah, even when you just said that to me, my first instinct was, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? I can't get that or guarantee that for you. I would
Right.
take that deal if he's guaranteeing it. Now,
Yeah.
come on. Do we really think that this guy can? Let's say that you're there for a year and the guy doesn't produce 13%. He produces 9%. And now I have a closed book of business. Are you going to feel okay with that? Or are you going to just move on to another advisor?
No, I tell them, after you find out the hard way,
Right.
bring back what's left and we'll talk.
Right, exactly. So
Really?
that's the biggest challenge. You don't ever want somebody to be in a position where they're in the power seat of telling you what you're going to do as a professional. You already know that 13% guy can't make that guarantee. They don't know it as the client. This is their first time. How do I tell you you're making a big mistake without hurting your feelings? It would be a key line that my dad would use.
Yeah, well, sometimes I even go to the hurt feelings thing. I had some relatives who were invested with Madoff, and they had the majority of their money there with both PhDs. And I just said, so you're going to get scammed. Oh, no, no, we had to give all the arguments you could. And finally, I had them dig in a little further, and they brought back the secret strategy, which no one knew about. And they told me, and they said, you can't tell anybody else about it. And they gave me a bunch of word salad, which made no sense whatsoever,
Yeah.
zero. And basically I deconstructed each part of it, and they realized two things. Well, I knew a lot more than they did, but I also was able to say with even greater confidence, you're getting hosed, you're getting smoked.
Mm.
They pulled their money out 9 months later, it went belly up. But sometimes
Wow.
people are only going to listen to what they want to hear.
Totally.
And the truth sometimes is tough. So I appreciate, and I think that's one of the reasons you and I clicked so early. I can detect that in others. You would have been equally successful in my world as an advisor, following in your dad's footsteps, because the truth sounds like the truth. When you take it all, when it's all said and done, it has a certain resonance to it. And you don't find the truth by speaking it as much as you do listening for it.
Wow, that's very impactful. I've thought many times in my adult life, not as a kid, because I didn't want to go through all of the exams that I would need to have taken in order to be in the financial world. But I love talking about money. I love moving money around. I love the whole idea of really being responsible for my future. I think if I had to do it all over again, I would either have done one of two things. I would either gone into the financial advisory world, or I would have gone into the trades. One of those two. I love working with my hands, whether it's plumbing, electrical, mechanical. I love working on old trucks and cars, but I also love talking and dealing with money too. So one of those two avenues would have been the way I would have gone.
What most people fail to see is managing the money is like the trades. It's you if you're a plumber and electrician, you're not emotional when you're putting things together.
Yep. Yep.
As an advisor, moving people's money around, I'm not emotional when I do it. I'm emotional about the outcome and my commitment to the client, but I am cold and calculating because there is a mechanical way to rationally invest towards specific goals over specific periods of time using realistic numbers that are attainable if you can exercise that consistent discipline in the
Right.
same way that a tradesman would have to. So that part of it, agreed, because I like messing around. I've got my wife often asks me, why do you have three screwdrivers that all do the same thing? I said, what do you mean three? Where's the other 20?
Only three. Where are my 17 more?
Are you kidding? And this thing with the design on it, it's a Phillips head. How many of these do you need? And I said, 12.
I need all of them. I
Right.
need them all.
And it's like, don't touch my tool set. But my point being that, there you can apply something and see a result immediately. The difference is when you're dealing in kind of the soft arts and combining it with almost the trades, because you've got a lot of more technical knowledge than I do around this, is where do you apply it? What do I use? How do I say it? How do I sell it? So it's that soft art of explaining to someone, look, this would work really well. You noting that when I leaned in, my microphone dropped out a little bit earlier, and being able to upgrade my tech, I wouldn't know what to buy. So I'm just going to ask you, because I know you'll steer me in the right way. Coming back to your dad for a second. I know we're jumping all over the place, but coming back to your dad for a second. Your dad almost, I would say, used a methodology of creating what I now refer to as constructive doubt.
Okay. Like that. That's good.
How would you define that? If you heard that term, how would you define the creation of constructive doubt?
Well, I think it's called a negative reverse. It's for me, constructive doubt. It sounds like you take away your product or service from your client and let them sell it back to you, which has been a very, very big thing in not only selling, but to help me attain whatever level of success that I have. I make them, my client, sell that to me. Hey, look, when we first got started, Gary, you said that you wanted to do social media posts. I'm not yet convinced that social media and video shorts are the way to go. What are you hearing about it? And then let you sell me into the idea of doing social media posts. That way, again, I'm not the one that's responsible. Yeah, I have a product that I need to deliver, but you're the one that needs to sell me on the idea before I quote unquote allow you to do that within my book of services. So maybe the constructive doubt is something very similar to negative reverse questioning.
I would even make it more simple than that. You and I start our relationship, and you say to me, what is it you're trying to accomplish? And I lay it out for you. And you say, what are you doing now? And I lay that out for you. And you go, they don't connect. There's no path from what you're doing now to what you're doing here, what you want to do down the line. With advisors, what I train them to say right up front is, if they're engaged with a potential investor, when you look at your investments at the end of each month or whenever you look at them, can you connect each investment with an outcome that really matters to you?
Mm-hmm.
And you find out immediately there's no planning, there's no strategy, there's no thought. What's a good return? Well, I want to beat the index. Why?
Just because it's more.
Right. Explain to me what that does for you.
Right.
What if it's less? Have you calculated what that pivot point is? Well, I just want to make as much as I can. Why?
Well,
and then you just go.
And there's different products that in your world that you can use. It could be a Roth versus, a traditional IRA. It could be a life insurance product, a whole life versus a term. It could be an annuity versus any other.
Believe it or not, that's the last and least important thing we discuss. So we establish what it is you're trying to do.
Right.
We establish what you're currently doing. I plot the gap, and then I explain the process of transitioning to something that's going to connect those 2 points. Product selection, security selection to me matters. It matters, but in an overall plan, it matters very little.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be tax efficient. Yeah, I want to make sure your family survives properly. But, if I see someone who is, they've got a retirement goal of X and basically they're going to miss it by a country mile, my explanation is you either have to retire later, save more, or retire on less. Which is it? I don't want any of that. Well, then we have to change what's going on now.
Right.
Okay, what do we do? That used to be my close. I wouldn't sell them anything.
What do we do? I love that.
Right. What do we do? That's what we do.
In my dad's world, it's like, what's next? What happens next?
Absolutely correct. 100%. So tell me where Turnkey came from. How did this all come up?
This was the biggest coincidence or comedy of not going in the right direction, turning into the right direction. I wrote a book back in 2015 It was called Nice Guys Finish First. I was reinventing my career at the time. I spent 30 years in entertainment, and I saw an end to that because life on the road or life, behind a microphone or turntables, because I was a DJ. It was great, but at 50 years old, I was like, how much longer can I do this? I don't see myself on the dance floor or up until 3 in the morning, and then and then starting all over again the next day and doing it again. So somewhere along the line, I saw this window of opportunity for me to write a book that taught other people how to do what I did to build that business. We were doing anywhere between $2 million to $3 million of entertainment a year, and it was a wonderful way to make a great income. But I wanted to see what was next. Where else could I have impact in my life? So I wrote the book Nice Guys Finish First, teaching people how to build better relationships for better business. And as a promotional tool for the book, I asked my friend Strickland, who was represented by the same agency. I said, hey, would you be open to starting a podcast? I know you're a sound engineer. You do a lot with technical stuff. I don't know any of that stuff. Would you be open to that? He said, sure. I just don't know what a podcast is, so we'll have to figure that out. And we both kind of stumbled through it together. We looked to our audience to buy more books and more services that I was providing, consulting services and customer support and in customer service and in customer experience. And while that was moving, it wasn't moving enough, and not enough to move the needle income-wise. So one guy in our audience, his name is Lou. Lou said, hey, I love all this stuff that you talk about. Can you teach me how to build a podcast? And I said to him, Lou, I took my dad's approach to selling. I said, Lou, I have no idea how to do that. Tell me, what do you need in order to make that happen? And how much would you be willing to invest in that? So he told me how much to charge. He told me what services that he wanted. And I said, let's go to work. And we went to work over 6 months building a podcast that became very successful, still podcasting to this day, 11 years later, as we are as well. And that was the first of probably 300 plus clients that have entered our turnkey world. We've done, 10,000 plus client episodes, 1,700 of my own episodes of my own show, The Nice Guys on Business. And that was really the beginning of listening to what your market wants, not pushing a product on your market that they don't want, but you think that they want in order to be successful. So that was the early beginnings to Turnkey, and that's where we are today with Turnkey as well.
So I know we've had this discussion before. Someone wants to do a podcast. They've got a message they want to get out there. There are some podcasts out there that, as you know, they have an extraordinary number of downloads or listens, or they've got advertisers, they're monetizing. Explain, if you will, if you have a podcast, what are the paths to monetization of that podcast itself? And take it from, all the way from like Jack Carr, Joe Rogan,
right,
all the way down to somebody that's got their first 10 episodes in the can.
Yeah, well, a guy like Tim Ferriss or Joe Rogan or Tony Robbins, they are coming to podcasting with a big community already. And if you're in Gary's listening audience, if the public only knew, in Gary's listening audience, and you're one of those that has 1 million people in your community already, great, start a podcast. It's easy to find advertisers and sponsors for somebody that's got a community of 1 million. The challenge is that normal people like you and me, Gary, and we'll put ourselves for a moment in the same boat here, we don't have a big community that we're coming into podcasting with. So we have to build our community within the podcasting space already. Now, for normal people, that would mean that we probably will have 200 to 300 people listening to your podcast episodes, if that. But the reality is I'd rather have 200 people listening and taking action than 200,000 people that are doing nothing. The challenge is that there is a long tail approach to podcasting success called advertising, and most podcasters never get there. I would even consider myself as a guy that's got 1,700 episodes in the can with what we have done and all of the experience that we've had in podcasting. An advertiser doesn't look to us to say, I want to pay you $5,000, $10,000 a month to advertise my clients with you, because they look at our downloads and they're like, hey, you got a couple thousand downloads per episode. That's great. But traditionally, advertising rates are usually anywhere from $20 to $25 per thousand listeners. So even if I had 10,000 listeners, we're only talking about $250 or so a month in advertising. Well, I don't want to have to work that hard to build my community. So I took the idea of where can I make money podcasting? I took out the traditional sources like advertising and sponsorship and went more into where can I draw a direct line between my services and someone buying my services. And what I discovered after about 2 years of doing this, it's not my audience, it's actually my guest, because my audience is anonymous. I don't know who they are. I may know who 10 or 20 or 30 of them are over time, but for the most part, I don't know who's in my audience, but I do know everyone that sits in my guest seat. So now I've started pre-qualifying people 2 years into this 11-year run that we've been in. I started pre-qualifying people to sit in my guest seat. Are they somebody that would be in a position for me to solve a problem that they have? And in my case, as a podcast producer, that is, are they looking for creative marketing? Are they looking for a way to expose their message to a greater audience? Are they looking to get prospects that they can't put in front of them traditionally, using, there's too many gatekeepers that hold our messages back from getting to the person we want as our prospect. But when you call somebody on the phone as a podcast producer or as a podcast host and say, hey, I'm Doug Sandler. I have a podcast called The Nice Guys on Business. We've been around for 11 years. Would you be open to sharing your message and your inspiration with my audience? That's a no-brainer. They say no, they say yes all the time. So for me, I've eliminated that gatekeeper completely. And now when I'm sitting them in the guest seat, I not only can ask them questions that will share their story with my audience, but now I can also ask them questions about how they creatively market their products and services. I can find out what their belief is in podcasting, or whatever services that you have. If they're related to your guest, whether it's a guest as a client, a guest as a potential referral source, a guest that could be an affiliate, meaning that they have a service that complements, doesn't compete with yours. They could be somebody that I don't know where they fit into my world, but I really had a great time, a great conversation with them, and I'd love to build a project or do something with them. Can we have an exploratory call? Those classifications of guests have made me, through the 11 years I've been doing this, or 9 years of doing it as a podcaster, they've made me millions of dollars. So why not work closely with my guests as opposed to the unknown anonymous audience? Now, I know that was a long answer to a very simple question, but I'm hoping I covered at least full circle where I make all of my money in podcasting.
I want to just touch on one thing that you taught me. There's no way to even know how many people are listening in real time. The only metric, apparently, that you can track is not number of plays, but it's downloads. Is that true?
Yeah, and the challenge is with downloads, unless you're going through a channel like YouTube that will tell you where the majority of people listened, where they jumped on, where they jumped off. And again, is that a relevant thing? You could have said something in that 60 seconds that meant something to one person, but would mean nothing to another person in your listening audience. A download is an impossible metric to take to Wells Fargo and cash. They will not cash a download for you. However, they will cash checks. So why not just have a straighter line between me and my referral source or my client? And I tell all podcasters that start with me, look, there's a couple ways that we can focus on building your revenue stream. One is I can go to your audience. It's going to take us about a year to build an audience, or even 2 years in some cases to build an audience. And then we can throw in a call to action, and maybe we can sell them something, maybe one of those or two of those people. Why not just shortcut it? Why not just pre-qualify the person to determine whether they actually have your service could be of value to them? Put them in your guest seat. Ask them further, soft skill sales types of questions without you being perceived as a salesy person, still sharing their story with your audience. And at the end, just saying, hey, that was a great conversation. Hey, one of the things that you said during our interview was this. Would you be open to discussing that a little bit more? Because I think I have a solution to that problem, but I'm not sure. Would you be open to sharing maybe 20 or 30 minutes with me? And that same line, that same conversation has happened to me hundreds of times through the last 11 years, to the point where I know almost without a doubt who is going to become a client or not. And what's really nice about it is I get to pick who sits in my guest seat. Yeah. So imagine having a line of prospects waiting to sign up for your services, and you being the one that's in control of that.
You touch on something that it's directly adjacent to something I learned early on. When someone has an opportunity to tell their story, there is a natural affinity for the listener. So when you're interviewing someone and they're telling their story of whatever they've built, whatever their success is, and you're deeply interested in it, there's a natural affinity. And it's a pretty simple reason why. Everybody they know already knows their story. But if it's the story of their success, I talked about this prior guest I just had on that I want to make sure you invite as well, who was phenomenal. We hit it off like crazy because I kept kind of drawing out more parts of his story, which were, he's basically, I'm just a blue collar lawnmower guy from
Right.
Nashville, Tennessee. No, you're
Right.
not.
Well,
No,
how
you solved something that it was obvious now in retrospect, and you iterated towards it. You worked your ass off to get there, and now you've got a business with literally no upside. And he's like, yeah. I said, how often do you hear from investment bankers? He goes, every day.
And how great is it to be able to share with somebody like that at the end of your interview after everybody feels good? They feel good because you've shared their story. You feel good because you've asked some great questions and you're getting some great answers, and they're open-ended, answers, and you're finding out more about them. Hey John, this has been a great conversation. Would you be open to having another call with me? Because I want to figure out what we can do together. I don't want this to end here.
No,
And
it's funny because he wants to talk again.
right, of course
And
they all do.
I said, look, when you're ready to really take this thing national, I mean, you're 300,000 customers now. When you're ready to 1 million and you want to go to 10 million, before you answer an investment banker's call, let's talk. He goes, I want to do that. I said, great, because that's my world that I can help him in. But Doug, it's funny. You and I have agreed on philosophically, I think a lot of things just from the outset. And I have valued your guidance, and I've enjoyed our relationship, but also the concept of getting those stories out, I think has a great deal of social value. I think that people can be inspired, not by one person's success, but by adopting an attitude that, hey, if that person can do it, and I'm looking at them now like they're on a pedestal, who were they before they were that?
Mm,
And you find out they were the same as everybody else.
right.
They just pursued something, learned as they went, and found a result that to other people, they're envious of. I look at it like the world's filled with possibilities.
Well, there's
Take a shot.
and I agree with that 100%. There are three winners when you have somebody sitting down in the podcast guest seat. The guest was winning because they get to share their message, and it is a feel good moment. You're winning because you potentially have a client and a new relationship that you've built on the other end, and you have this third party that is the winner also, and that's the audience that's listening to this message and getting some inspiration. When you go into a traditional sales cycle, there is usually only two people that are winning if you've put somebody into your products or services. You're solving a problem that the client has, and you're making a commission or a portion of the profit. But there really is nobody else that's winning. Isn't it great? We're entering in a third party into the equation, and that's your audience. The more you do that, and not everybody that's sitting in your guest seat is a potential prospect. I mean, I've had some heavy hitters: Gary Vaynerchuk, Ariana Huffington, John C. Maxwell, Jeffrey Gitomer, Grant Cardone. I mean, I've had some huge names in my guest seat, and great big names like that beget other great big names, and which beget a lot of smaller names as well. And so when you start to build that inventory of heavy hitters, like Sean D. Nelson, the guy from Lovesac, the CEO. I think he was on your show as well. Great guy. This is a guy that's running $1 billion organization. How much wisdom and knowledge does he have? And he sat in my guest seat for an hour, and we shared. And I think he was on my show twice. I'm getting free coaching from all of these people.
Yeah.
It's the greatest thing ever.
I think did you have Wambi Rose on as well?
I don't know the name. You probably know my
I don't know
inventory
how
better
he
than
got
I
to
do.
me. That's one. I pushed his episode up. Love Pop.
Nice.
We got Love Sack and we got Love Pop. Phenomenal. So goes from naval architecture to selling pop-up greeting cards, which will blow you away.
Wow,
That's somebody
very
you want to
cool.
have on as well. Wambi was
Nice.
awesome.
Nice.
You check out his episode. It's sitting on your servers.
Absolutely.
Doug, last thing, if anybody's listening and they're considering, maybe they have something to say, maybe they want to promote something, or maybe they just want to get some messaging out, how do they find you? What should they expect? And what should they not expect if they're going to start a podcast from scratch?
Yeah, definitely not an overnight success. It takes a little while. If you're looking for a quick way to turn a dollar, this is definitely not the way to do it. It does take a little bit longer. Yeah, we have people that have early on successes, and we have some people that are scratching their head a year into it thinking, what have I done? they don't realize sometimes people come to me and they're not ready to receive coaching. I said this before I hit we hit record. The teacher will appear when the student is ready, I think that's the expression. The teacher will appear when the student is ready. Yep. Oftentimes my clients come into podcasting thinking that they could do something really quickly with it, and they have all of the ideas and they're just looking for a production partner. Certainly, I'm happy to be that. I'm happy to take somebody's money for them to do that, but I'd much rather them have an idea and a success path. So if somebody in your audience is looking for a successful path to profiting from podcasting, let's have a call. Let's figure out if it makes sense. But before you jump on a call with me, I have this toolkit, 5 ways to make money podcasting, how to start, grow, and profit from podcasting. It's just 2 little PDFs that they can check out. Just go to turnkeypodcast.com/toolkit, TOOLKIT, and they can take a non-confrontational or non-invasive approach to podcasting before they jump on a call with me. If they feel like, oh, this guy's going to try to sell me, I don't want to sell them. Let's make sure it's something that they even are interested in doing first.
Doug, thanks so much for coming on today.
Love it.
Always
Thanks,
enjoy
Jerry.
our conversations, and this one especially.
Thanks, Jerry.
And
Happy to
thanks
be here.
again for all you guys do. It's been awesome. Listening to If the Public Only Knew. Our guest today is kind of my Sherpa down this path, Doug Sandler. Check him out. You'll be glad you did. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in to If the Public Only Knew. Don't forget to follow the show and share it with anyone who's ready for the real raw stories behind the business successes. Join Gary next time for another powerful conversation that will leave you inspired and ready to take action.